Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita FINLEY.
Authors. Everybody knows that I love to interview authors. I love to interview more than others because they have so much more to say, and that's what we're going to do today. So our author today is Monty Helfgott, and Monty is not only an author, but he likes to help other people to be authors too. So welcome to the show, Monty.
Thank you, Anita. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And you really have taken this on. I mean, this has not really been your profession.
No, someone said, well, how come all of a sudden you're writing? Actually, I've been writing all my life, whether it was my dissertation, my doctorate, or writing clinical reports or poetry when I was in high school. I always was writing, but I never wrote a novel before. I did write books in my area of educational psychology, though, 6 of them. But after a while, after I retired, I wanted something more exciting.
And these are exciting. So let me start off. We had the pleasure of actually making Monty the book of the month in our July issue, July 2017. And that was called The Silence. It wasn't very silent, though. It was very noisy, actually. And then he snuck in The Silence Book 2 and The Silence Book 3 to me. So he definitely is a passionate author, and I don't know if when he takes time to do all this, but it's certainly I think it's grabbed you. It really has grabbed you, hasn't it?
It has grabbed me, and what's going on right now is Book 4.
No way.
Sequel, which is what they want over on the West Coast. There's nothing in writing, but I'm working on it right now. A sequel that will take the main character, the protagonist, John Mackenzie, into the next level of his interaction with the world. And he has a son in this next book called Alexander. And the interesting thing is that it has something very much connected with Iran and their nuclear program. And as you know, what's going on in the streets of many cities in Iran right now, is that not interesting? But we're going to keep the Russians involved also. So there's going to be that excitement as well.
Are you having to do a lot of research?
I am. I'm doing a lot of research, both in archaeology as well as current events, to find out what's going on. I have to meet with a nuclear scientist, actually, to get more information, which will take place in writing the book because of the nuclear development that has been going on in Iran over the last 10 or 15 years, etc. But I won't go beyond that.
So this is even more interesting now, because when I first read the book, I saw John, the hero protagonist, as a 007 type.
Exactly.
Very much like that. But I really pictured him, and I want to go back to what you just said with the son. Was that from his Love of Life?
That's right. Rachel and John were married when he came down from the mountain in Australia, and they had a child 9 months later, and the child is now growing up. So I'm going to take the story, maybe even start it 20 years into the future, and then work backwards. I'm not exactly sure, but the son has even much more intensive mystical powers than both his parents.
Because both of them were very unusual anyway, and I could see how that would happen. It's almost like the kids from Mars. No, but I want to just go back. I want everyone to know this is a novel. We're not talking about some history. What we're doing is talking about someone who understands the history and turned it into something that I would call make-believe, but not really, because so many of the points and the adventures in there have reality.
That's why I wanted to incorporate historical aspects into the novel. And so the genre is paranormal historical thriller.
Paranormal historical thriller.
So that people can connect with the various places that John Mackenzie travels to in his quest to find out who he is and to escape both what I call the iron jaws of both the Russian KGB and the American CIA, because they all want what he's got.
Oh, my. I'm kind of very rarely am I speechless, but I'm finding that happening here with you. So tell me personally, are you able to sleep at night?
Rarely.
I was just going to say.
I'll tell you, I get some great ideas just before I fall asleep, and I say, Monty, write them down. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't know what it is. You go into another, neurological rhythm in your brain at different times at night, and then they're different from what occurs when you are in your waking state.
Yes.
But I'm doing what I call fly casting, which means my goal, and I know that I've told you this, it would be phenomenal. It may happen. I have one chance, maybe 100,000, of making book one into a film. And I'm working towards this because one of my neighbors is a Hollywood person, retired now, but he's produced many films, knows his way around lots of different production units, Hollywood stars, and one of his nephews was one of the main characters in the most recent, or the second edition of Murder on the Orient Express.
I saw that.
And this might contact, I won't mention his name, I'll just call him Irv. What he did was he gave the whole package to his nephew, all the books and all the promotional materials, and his wife has a production company. So she's hiring people to read everything and see what the outcome will be. I don't know.
I'm jumping up and down with excitement.
I don't know.
Well, but I have heard that they're looking for exciting things. There are more people that want to produce and don't have the material. So it could be a perfect time.
It could very well be. The revenue for movies during 2017 was low, and they're hoping that it will increase maybe with 2018 and into the future with some really good books and films.
I just saw Churchill, which that is not in the darkest hour. Wasn't
film.
That man on
Darkest Hour?
Yeah, he better get the Academy Award winner because
Gary Oldman, what an actor!
Wasn't he something? I had chills. All of the audience stood up and applauded at the end. Did they do that for you too?
Absolutely.
Oh, I have goosebumps
Absolutely.
thinking, wasn't
he's
that
quite
great?
an actor. His transformation. I don't know if you saw him in some of his other films, like The Professional.
No.
Which was a fabulous film. He was very different. He was a police officer in New York City. Now he looks just like Churchill. I don't know how he did it. But, it's Hollywood.
Of course.
Do great things. But this movie, I think, what was it called? Not Our Finest Hour.
Yeah, I think the Finest Hour. Something like that, right.
That.
Darkest Hour. The Darkest Hour.
And I think it only took place in a few weeks in a very crisis time in England. But it was very monumental. And I think if there wasn't a Churchill, what would have happened to the world?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's true. And, of course, I saw Dunkirk. But I felt badly about what happened. It was very sad. And, of course, he incorporated, that was part of what he did, but it wasn't of the same power.
No.
I don't even know who the star was there.
A lot of young guys, good-looking Hollywood actors.
Yeah, but this
I don't know.
Was the...
But this was history.
Very much.
History that was such a powerful impact upon the world.
And something I didn't know, but the person that went with me said, but I have the book about his wife, who is an American. I didn't even know that. I'd not been a Churchill. I just haven't known that much about him. And she's going to give me the book, and apparently the book shows that she was very powerful in his life.
Mm-hmm. And I think his mother was also an American.
Yes.
His mother was an American, yeah.
So now that's even easier. One thing that my friend said, and I think it's because you said it was a short time, it didn't show the Americans coming in. I know Roosevelt wanted to, but he was being held back from doing that. But I know that my husband flew B-17s in 1944. And so when they needed that help, because we didn't see any of that yet. This was 1940. This was early.
This was like 1940.
Yeah.
Before America entered the war, and America could not enter the war until the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor. And that opened everything up with tremendous amount of support and arms for England as well as our other allies.
Okay, well,
amazing.
Let's go back to your stuff, because I was going to ask you, who would you like to play John and his son?
Well,
let's just make believe it's going.
I thought would make a great John?
Who?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale. The name is familiar, and probably I would recognize him, but by his name.
He's been in a million movies. The first time I saw him, he was in a Spielberg film about Japan called The Rising Sun. He was only about 8 years old, but now he's in so many movies. American Psycho, just a huge amount. A very fine actor. He might be good. But then there's someone else that I thought of, the one who played Thor.
I didn't see
the
that.
god. He's tall. He's got that blonde hair and a lot of
we have
action.
To have blonde. That's right. It's blonde.
I don't know. The son, I have no idea. I'm just trying to write the sequel.
Right. Whatever it is.
I'm just trying to write the sequel. But
what I could see is once someone's really interested, they start sending it out to actors. And then
that's what we need.
Yeah,
we need an actor to say, I want, an
Fight
A-list
for it.
actor.
For it, right?
I want that part. This is a juicy part. I want it. That's going to help produce it. So
let's get some of you to buy this book. Now, I'll tell you how you're going to do that, because, of course, you can always go to Amazon. That's the easiest way, isn't it? Just go to Amazon.
Amazon is the easiest way.
It's silence.
But there are thousands and thousands of books on Amazon.
No, but your name, if they put in Monty Helfgott, Helfgott,
right.
Put in Monty Helfgott, Helfgott, and you could buy The Silence, and then you could buy book 2 and book 3.
Correct.
So you get caught up at least.
That's right. And when you go onto the site, you'll see all the reviews that have come in over the last few years, which they sound great.
Right. Yeah, well, but once someone reads it, it is fascinating. I don't read a lot of books that have a lot of murder and things in it, but it was so well done, because I love the historical parts and the mystery and the, I've always been into science, scientific things, but historical, and I love space, and so it worked for me. But I loved your characters. That's what moved me. It's the characters. The character.
Now, you mentioned 007 James Bond.
I like that.
I totally agree with that, but I also added the dimension of Indiana Jones, the archaeologist, because there is archaeology involved in this whole thing. And the sequel is going to have something more that I just discovered a few days ago. I'm not going to say anything
no, you can't do that.
About that. So we'll see what happens. I'll be down in my writer's cave, as I do. I just go down in there and I just write. But on another note, in terms of writing, Anita, that I established a memoir writers club in my community, and it's turned out phenomenal. People are writing about things that they forgot about or suppressed for many, many years, and it's really helping them to bring out their lives. And in order to celebrate them, I'm putting into effect what I call Night of the Writers, where I'm going to have not only people from my Memoir Writers Club, but also already established published authors that will be asked questions, and they'll talk to the audience. And the audience can meet them, ask them more questions, and they can also have a book. They can purchase one of their books and have it autographed. So I feel that it's so important to illuminate authors, and there are many of them, and there's tremendous competition. So let's bring out what they have put into their writing, which is one of the most difficult things to ever do in a lifetime, the work of writing, which people think, well, I write, no big deal. No, it is huge, time-consuming, and what it does to you in terms of there's an isolation that takes place. So I'm a big proponent of putting the spotlight on writers.
I think this comes from your profession of being an educational psychologist.
It does.
and that's beautiful that you were able to take what you did for so long and move it into an area that you're working on now. So I'm very impressed with that, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And this is not for the outside public yet, though. This is for your society. But
it's just for,
I can see something happening here.
Well, part 2, Night of the Writers Part 2, will be opened up to many more people in South Florida. But right now, I don't think we can get more than 250 people in the social hall, and there's enough people in the community to do that. So we'll just, and I want to work out any bugs that might occur. It's going to require a lot of promotion, publicity, and organization. But I like that.
I know
There's
you
electricity
do.
in
That's
it,
right.
and I like
Just
it.
call him John. No, I appreciate it also. But I would tell you, just adding on to what you said, I've always looking for authors, and there are a lot of people, of course, living in South Florida who were in the Holocaust. And I do get a lot of books, and I don't want to do a lot of them. It's not a good for us. So I've done a few, but there was one, and it struck me because the cover, and you may not remember, the cover looked like a man in a jail cell, but it was that uniform that they put on the
striped pajamas.
Yes, right. And that was the cover of his book. So I called there, and I thought, and I had gotten the book, and I thought it was really very, very, well, I don't want to use the word sad, but it was very well done. And when I called, I did get to talk to him, but what he said is, I can't be on the radio. I can't talk about it. I can write about it. So his wife said she would do it, but then she didn't want to. So I wound up having to read from the book. That's how I did it. Mm-hmm. So it's part of what you're saying. A lot of the people writing memoirs have this deep, some of it's so deep,
a
but
passion to
bringing
pass
it
on
out.
the legacy,
right?
To preserve the legacy. Yeah, that's part of it.
So you could see, and I'll tell you another one about the Holocaust. It just was so important. I had he was an advertiser, but he was a friend. It was a doctor, and I can say his name. Well, sorry. He's a plastic surgeon here in Boca Raton, quite famous. And he was on the radio show. And that morning, he brought his father, who was also a surgeon, of course, retired. And we were talking about something in the Holocaust, and his father started talking about it. And my client said he had never heard his father talk about it before he got on the radio. Here it is now. Here's this wasn't a kid. If he was 50, his father must have been 80. Isn't that something?
Well, that's the silence. You see, the silence. There are many forms of silence, including not letting your children or grandchildren know about experiences that you have undergone. And why does that happen? And the silence is so loud that I wanted to write about the silence of what occurred to many people in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, but also the silence that exists between fathers and sons, which was something that I brought in from my personal past. And I wanted to illuminate that. It's not unusual, but it still is very painful to not have communication between fathers and sons.
And I think that was more so years ago.
Yes, more so. People that were grew up during the Great Depression and went through World War II, they were silent. And then there were others who came out of the Holocaust or just emigrated from Europe and had difficult times. They're also silent. And I've got to get you a magazine article that I just finished writing for my Valencia Point community. It's all about that, the silence of children, the silence of older people. But this the grandfather in this little thing that I made up talks about what it was like in shtetl life before he came to America.
I'm sure that is powerful. And today, I hope that even though it's easier for people to talk about it, the children are so involved in their, in their iPhones and their iPads and all these things that I hope.
Their electronic games.
Right. Well, I will tell you this, and you know that my husband just passed away about a year ago, but we have triplet grandchildren. They live in Miami. And when we would go down there, normally they'd watch television even at the dinner table. And finally, my husband didn't really like that, but my son finally said, we're not doing any more television. Turned it off. And, they don't like it. But we got my husband to start telling stories. And they liked to hear the stories about the war and other things, and he flew planes. And the attention was amazing. So then it became, well, tell us a story, Grandpa, when we go down there. So I think there is a yearning for that, but it's a mixture.
The storyteller has to open up and tell the stories, and the children and grandchildren have to be open to it to get that communication through. And that's the legacy, and that's a form of verbal memoir. When an older person tells their story to their descendants.
Well, I have a little special prize, and I know that you're talking about memoir writing, but we have an incredible advertiser. Well, he's a doctor. He is a pulmonologist, and you'll read him on page 3 when you read Dr. Farrar. Dr. Farrar has a daughter who's 13. She wrote a book, and it's all bound and beautiful. I put it in the January issue, as the publisher's choice. You absolutely will not believe the way that she moves this story along. It's a mystery, but it's really so interesting, and I'm going to wait till it comes out. But she could be a wonderful person to come to one of your symposiums,
Night of the Writers,
the Night of the Writers.
Part 2 or 3.
Yes, because if they would see what some young woman did, 13, and this is an electrifying book.
I think the audience would love it.
They would love it, because how many of their children could be writing and they don't even know it? And maybe they would encourage it. But this wasn't just a little book. This is a young woman who definitely, well, even her teachers apparently said that when she was much younger had a lot of talent, but now at 13, she is definitely going to be someone that
a writing prodigy.
A writing prodigy. That's right. That's a good word, and you can advertise it that way. But I know that, and you love the parents. They're from Cuba, actually, and they're phenomenal. He is a world-renowned pulmonologist, and so it's. But I thought about that. So tell me about your family, in a sense. Are there any writers in your family?
That's a very good question. I don't understand how I became such a good writer, because there's no one in my family. They were not readers, and they were not writers, and they were not college educated. They were working class people. I don't know. There are so many things that's the ancestry part that I don't understand. Where did it come? Why was I in school plays from the age of 8 years of age, and then went up through comedy and musical productions through high school and somewhat beyond, and did my writing? I don't know where it came from. I'm trying to find out. So I'm going to do some investigation on Ancestry.com. That's the mystery.
Well, you have an unusual name, so it will not be hard if there are people out there with your name.
Yes.
To find them.
Yeah, that's easy enough to do that. I know that there are only about 50 families in the whole world with my last name, and one of them, I don't know if you know this, David Helfgott from Australia, the pianist he had a movie made about him about 15 years ago, where Jeffrey Rush was the main character, and
this wasn't the pianist. No, he didn't play that. No,
Jeffrey Rush played the adult pianist.
Yes,
right, and he was a child prodigy. He had a lot of emotional problems. My cousin, David Helfgott. You look him up, you'll see. And when it came out, I knew nothing about him. So he lives in Australia, and when I go there, I'm going to see Ayers Rock, which is in book 1, and I'm going to visit my cousin in Australia. So.
And you've never been to Australia?
I've never been to Australia. I want to go to Australia and New Zealand.
Yes.
That's one of my on my bucket list, as they say.
Oh, you should, yes. And it turns out that my daughter-in-law is Italian, and as you know, in Italy, even though he was an architect, professionals, things just dried up. So he was looking for a job, and he found one in Australia, took his family there, and he lives in Perth, which is very far away. And they went to visit them. It was a fabulous, fabulous trip. So I think it's going to be great for you, and I guess that we're just about out of time, and this has been, as usual, joyful.
An electric event.
Electric event. We'll get you on YouTube, and thank you very much. It's Monty Helfgott, and that's The Silence, Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, and we'll be hearing about him more. Thank you.
You're welcome.